The unexpected meeting. The rain came suddenly, heavy and relentless, drumming against the old cobblestone streets and splashing against the sidewalks. I hadn't expected it, and of course, I didn't have an umbrella. With my books pressed tightly against my chest, I sprinted across the street and ducked into the nearest open door, the library. It wasn't my usual place, but that evening, it became my refuge. Inside, the air was cool and smelled faintly of old paper, polished wood, and the kind of quiet comfort that only libraries seem to hold. I shook the water from my hair, my jacket sticking uncomfortably to my skin. As I stepped deeper inside, the sound of the storm faded, replaced by the low hum of silence broken only by the turning of pages. That's when I saw her. She was sitting alone at a corner table, a warm lamp casting a soft golden glow across her face. Her hair fell in loose waves over her shoulders, dark and glistening like silk. She was completely absorbed in her book, her eyes moving quickly over the words, her lips barely moving as though she was whispering them to herself. There was something magnetic about her, something that made it impossible to look away. I hesitated. I could have chosen another table, one farther away, one safer. But my feet carried me toward her as if they had already made the choice for me. I slipped into the chair across from her, telling myself it was just coincidence, just a need for quiet, but deep down, I knew better. I was drawn to her in a way I couldn't explain, in a way that both excited and scared me. She noticed me almost immediately. Her eyes lifted from her book and locked onto mine. They weren't just brown or hazel or anything simple like that, they were the kind of eyes that made you feel seen, like every hidden thought and unspoken feeling you carried had suddenly become visible. For a second, I thought I should look away, but I couldn't. "Bad weather out there," she said softly, closing her book with a gentle motion. Her voice was calm and smooth, carrying a warmth that felt almost familiar. "Yeah," I replied, a little too quickly. My heart was pounding, and I prayed she couldn't hear it. She smiled faintly, tilting her head as if she was studying me. "Lucky you found shelter here." "Yeah," I repeated again, cursing myself for sounding awkward. "I guess I got lucky." She chuckled lightly, the sound small but unforgettable, and for a moment, the storm outside didn't matter anymore. I didn't know her name yet. I didn't know her story. But in that quiet library, with the rain beating against the windows and the world fading around us, I felt something stir inside me, something I had been too afraid to name. And when I finally realized it, I knew that meeting her wasn't just chance. It was the beginning of something that could change everything. The first conversation. The storm outside showed no signs of calming, the wind howling against the windows like some restless spirit. Yet inside the library, it felt strangely safe, like the walls were holding us in a secret space away from the rest of the world. She set her book down fully this time, as though she had decided I was far more interesting than the story she had been reading. "I'm Emma," she said, her lips curving into a small but genuine smile. It took me a second to respond, not because I hadn't heard her, but because the way her name sounded seemed to echo inside me. "I'm Leah," I managed, my voice softer than I intended. "Leah," she repeated slowly, like she was tasting the name. "Pretty name." Heat rushed to my cheeks, and I lowered my eyes to the table, hoping she wouldn't notice. But when I glanced back up, her smile told me she already had. "What were you reading?" I asked quickly, desperate to steer the conversation away from my blush. She lifted the book so I could see the cover. A collection of short stories. I like the kind that feel real, you know? Where the characters could be people you might meet on the street. I nodded, intrigued not just by her words but by the passion in her voice. "So, you're into realism." "You could say that," Emma replied. "Stories that remind me of how beautiful the ordinary can be." She leaned forward slightly, her elbows resting on the table. "What about you? Do you like to read?" "I do," I admitted, though I rarely spoke about it to anyone. "Mostly novels. The kind that take you somewhere far away, where life feels bigger than it does here." She tilted her head, studying me again in that way that made me feel exposed but not judged. "So, you like to escape." The way she said it, soft but certain, hit deeper than I expected. My breath caught, and for a moment, I didn't know how to answer. Maybe she had seen something in me that I hadn't even fully admitted to myself. "I guess I do," I whispered finally. Emma's smile softened, not mocking, not prying, just understanding. "Nothing wrong with that. Sometimes we need to get lost before we can find what we're looking for." I couldn't explain why, but those words settled into me like they belonged there. It was strange how quickly she had gone from a stranger to someone who felt like she understood pieces of me I had never dared to show anyone else. We talked for a while after that, about books, about the storm, about little things that didn't matter but somehow meant everything. Every word built a bridge between us, every glance held longer than it should have, every small smile lighting up something inside me I had kept hidden for far too long. By the time the rain began to slow, I realized I didn't want it to stop at all. Because when the storm ended, I would have no excuse to sit there with her anymore. The lingering glance. The rain had softened into a steady drizzle, tapping gently against the windows like a lullaby. People began to trickle out of the library, shaking off umbrellas and hurrying into the damp evening. But Emma and I stayed. It was as if time had paused for us, holding us inside this quiet moment neither of us wanted to end. She leaned back in her chair, her fingers absent-mindedly tracing the rim of her coffee cup. "Funny, isn't it? How you can walk into a place expecting nothing, and suddenly," she paused, her eyes catching mine with a spark I couldn't quite define. "You find something that feels like it matters." Her words settled in my chest, heavy and warm all at once. I shifted nervously, tucking a strand of wet hair behind my ear. "Yeah," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Like, maybe the storm wasn't so bad after all." Emma's smile deepened, not wide or obvious, but enough to make my heart skip. "Exactly." I tried to focus on the books around us, the polished wood shelves, the faint smell of paper, anything to ground myself. But my eyes kept drifting back to her, her delicate fingers tapping lightly against the table, the way her hair curled softly at the ends, the way her eyes lingered on me just a little longer than necessary. There was something unspoken in the air between us. It wasn't loud or overwhelming, it was subtle, delicate, like the quiet pull of a tide. I felt it in the way our knees brushed under the table, in the way our laughter overlapped, in the way silence between us felt comfortable instead of awkward. "So," Emma said suddenly, tilting her head. "What's your story, Leah? Not the whole thing, just the part you're willing to share with a stranger on a rainy night." Her question caught me off guard, but the softness in her tone made it feel safe. I hesitated before answering. "I guess my story is, I've always been searching for something. I don't always know what it is, but I know when I haven't found it yet." Emma's gaze didn't waver. She nodded slowly, like she understood more than I had said. "Searching can be lonely." "It can," I admitted. "But sometimes, I think the right person makes the world feel less lonely. Even if you just met them." For a second, her eyes flickered with something, recognition, maybe, or agreement. She leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Then maybe tonight isn't such an accident after all." The words hung between us, electrifying and fragile. My pulse quickened, and I felt the urge to look away, to escape the intensity of her gaze. But I didn't. I couldn't. The rain outside might have slowed, but inside me, a storm had only just begun. The first spark. The library was beginning to empty, the silence growing even deeper as the last few patrons drifted out into the damp evening. The lamps cast a golden glow across the tables, turning the space into something intimate, almost secretive. It felt as though the world outside didn't exist, just Emma and me, caught in this quiet bubble where every glance and every word carried weight. She leaned a little closer, her elbow resting on the table, her chin balanced on her hand. "You know," she said softly, "you don't seem like the kind of person who usually hides in libraries during storms." I laughed, though the sound came out nervous. "You'd be surprised. I spend a lot of time hiding. Maybe not always in libraries, but hiding all the same." Her expression softened, her eyes tracing mine as though she could read the truth in them. "What are you hiding from?" I hesitated. The question felt dangerous, like she had pressed gently against a door I had kept locked for a long time. "Myself, maybe," I whispered before I could stop the words from spilling out. Emma didn't laugh or look away. Instead, she reached across the table, her fingers brushing mine ever so slightly. The touch was light, accidental in appearance, but I knew it wasn't. My breath caught, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't want to pull back. Her voice dropped lower, soft enough that it felt like a secret. "Sometimes the parts of ourselves we're hiding are just waiting for the right person to notice them." The way she said it, the way her eyes held mine, made something inside me break open. My chest felt tight, my skin alive with an awareness I couldn't ignore. The storm outside might have passed, but inside me, it was only growing stronger. I wanted to say something, anything, but words failed me. Instead, I let the silence stretch between us, filled only by the sound of our breathing and the faint hum of the lights above. My fingers trembled slightly as they remained near hers, not quite touching, but close enough that the space between us felt electric. Emma tilted her head, her lips curving into a small, knowing smile. "You feel it too, don't you?" The question stole the air from my lungs. I should have denied it, should have laughed it off, should have found some way to retreat back into safety. But I couldn't. Not with her eyes on me, not with my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst. "Yes," I whispered. "I do." For a moment, she said nothing. Then, slowly, she turned her hand so that her fingers slid gently against mine, entwining them with a quiet certainty. The touch was simple, but it felt like the most intimate thing I had ever experienced. And just like that, the door I had kept shut for so long creaked open. The quiet confession. The weight of her hand in mine was light, but it felt like gravity itself had shifted. Every nerve in my body seemed to spark with awareness, every thought tangling into one undeniable truth: I wanted her close, closer than I had ever wanted anyone before. We sat there for a long time, our hands resting together on the table. Neither of us spoke, but the silence wasn't empty. It was charged, alive, like every second we didn't move only drew us deeper into the invisible pull between us. Finally, Emma broke the stillness. "You know," she said, her voice barely louder than a whisper, "I wasn't planning on staying long tonight. Just an hour to read and then head home. But then you sat down." Her words trailed off, but I understood what she meant. My heart tightened in my chest. "And now?" I asked softly. "Now," she said, her thumb brushing lightly against mine, "I don't want the night to end." The admission made my pulse race. I swallowed hard, trying to gather the courage that had always escaped me before. "Emma, I don't usually let people in this easily. I've always been careful. Maybe too careful." She leaned forward slightly, her eyes never leaving mine. "Careful with your heart?" "Yes," I whispered. "Careful with who I am." Her gaze softened, filled with understanding. "You don't have to be careful with me." The words slid into me like a key fitting into a lock. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to let go of the walls I had built and step into whatever this was, whatever it could be. "Emma," I said, my voice trembling but steady enough to carry the weight of what I meant, "I don't know why, but I feel like I've known you longer than just tonight." Her lips curved into a small smile, her eyes shining. "That's because some connections don't follow the rules of time. They just happen." Something inside me loosened, and before I could stop myself, I added, "I think I've been waiting for you without even knowing it." Her hand tightened around mine, firm but gentle, her expression shifting into something deeper, something that made my chest ache with longing. She didn't reply right away, and I worried for a second that I had said too much. But then she whispered, "I've been waiting too." The honesty between us felt raw, almost fragile. But instead of breaking, it wrapped around us like a thread, binding us closer than before. The storm outside had nearly faded, the night growing quiet and still. Yet within me, something louder than thunder echoed, the certainty that this was no ordinary night, no ordinary meeting. This was the beginning of something I had never dared to dream could be real. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of it. The space between us. The library was nearly empty now, the overhead lamps dimmed to a softer glow as if even the building knew the night was winding down. Yet, for us, it felt like something was only just beginning. Emma's hand was still in mine, her fingers gently entwined with mine, and though the touch was simple, it carried a weight that pressed against my chest in the most delicate, dangerous way. I kept thinking I should let go before someone noticed, before the quiet reality of the world rushed back in, but I didn't. I couldn't. That one small connection had become an anchor, keeping me steady even as my thoughts spun wildly. She leaned closer, her voice low enough that it felt meant for no one but me. Do you feel how different it is right now? Like the world outside doesn't matter? Her words sank into me, and I nodded slowly, my breath caught in my throat. Yes, I whispered. Like we're in our own little space. Her lips curved into a smile, one that was equal parts gentle and knowing. For a moment, neither of us spoke, the silence stretching comfortably between us, filled only with the sound of the rain dripping faintly outside. My heart beat so loudly that I was certain she could hear it, but she didn't call attention to it. Instead, she let her thumb trace over the back of my hand in a rhythm that made my pulse race even faster. I don't usually do this, I confessed, my voice trembling. I don't let people see me like this. Emma tilted her head, her gaze unwavering. Like what? Like someone who wants more, I said softly, surprising myself with the honesty of it. Someone who's afraid of wanting too much. She didn't pull away. If anything, her grip on my hand tightened just slightly, grounding me. Wanting isn't something to be afraid of, Leah. It's what makes us alive. Her words washed over me like a truth I had been waiting to hear all my life. The space between us grew smaller, not physically yet, but emotionally. The way she looked at me, the way her voice softened for me, the way her presence felt so natural, so inevitable, it all pulled me closer without either of us moving. I realized then that I didn't want to run from it anymore. The door to the library creaked as someone exited, and the sound startled me. But instead of breaking the moment, it made it clearer, the world outside was still turning, but ours had already shifted. I looked back at her, my chest tightening with a mixture of fear and longing. Emma's eyes searched mine, steady and unafraid. Leah, she said softly, whatever this is, I want you to know. I'm not running from it. Her words lit something inside me, a quiet flame that had been waiting for air. And as the door closed again in the distance, I realized my own heart was opening wider than it ever had before. When silence spoke louder. The night outside had grown completely still. The storm was gone, leaving only the faint shine of wet streets and the occasional drip of water from the gutters. Inside, the library was hushed, the quiet stretching long past closing hours, but neither of us made any move to leave. It felt like the world had carved out this pocket of time just for us, and I wasn't ready to let it go. Emma's hand still held mine, warm and steady, her thumb brushing gently in a rhythm that felt both calming and electrifying. Every touch, every glance, every pause between our words seemed to draw us closer together, until the air between us was so charged it felt impossible to ignore. My chest rose and fell with uneven breaths, and I realized I wasn't just nervous, I was alive in a way I had never been before. She shifted in her chair, leaning forward slightly, her face lit by the golden glow of the lamp. Her eyes never left mine. You're quiet, she said softly, her voice carrying a tenderness that made my heart ache. I'm overwhelmed, I admitted, the truth spilling out without thought. I don't know what this is, but it feels like it's changing me. Her expression softened, her lips curving into that half-smile I was beginning to recognize as hers alone. Not everything needs to be understood right away, Leah. Sometimes it's enough to just feel it. The words hung between us, and I realized she was right. Maybe I didn't need to name it yet. Maybe all I needed was to allow myself to be here, with her, in this moment that felt like it had been waiting for us both. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full, brimming with everything we weren't saying aloud. And then, without planning, without hesitation, the distance between us finally closed. Emma leaned closer, her hand sliding from mine to gently touch my cheek. Her skin was warm against my own, her touch both tentative and certain all at once. My breath caught, and my eyes fluttered closed as if my body already knew what was about to happen. And then it did. Her lips brushed against mine in the faintest, softest kiss, so light it could have been mistaken for an accident, if not for the way her hand lingered against my face and the way my entire body seemed to melt into the contact. It wasn't just a kiss, it was a question, an invitation. I answered without words, leaning into her, my lips pressing back against hers with a hunger I hadn't known I carried. The kiss deepened, slow and tender, each movement careful but filled with unspoken need. My heart raced, my hands trembling as I reached for her, holding on to her as though I had finally found something I had been searching for all my life. When we finally pulled back, our foreheads rested together, breaths mingling in the quiet. Emma whispered, her voice barely audible, the door closed, and something new opened. And I knew she was right. A new beginning. The kiss lingered in my memory even as it ended, leaving me breathless, shaken, and yet more whole than I had ever felt. My heart was still racing, my lips tingling, and all I could do was cling to the truth that something irreversible had happened. Emma stayed close, her forehead pressed gently against mine, her breath warm as it mingled with my own. Neither of us spoke for a moment, and in that silence, I realized that words might never be enough to capture what had passed between us. Finally, she pulled back just enough to look at me, her eyes shimmering in the dim light. "Leah," she whispered, "I don't know where this is going, but I know I don't want to let it go." Her honesty struck deep, and I felt tears threaten at the corners of my eyes. I had spent so much of my life guarding myself, hiding behind walls built from fear and doubt. But here she was. Someone who had walked through the same storm I had, someone who had reached across the table and, with a single touch, shown me I didn't have to be afraid anymore. "I don't want to let it go either," I admitted, my voice trembling but sure. "For once, I don't want to run." Her hand found mine again, squeezing gently, her touch grounding me in a way that felt like home. Outside, the storm had completely cleared, the world washed clean under the glow of streetlights. The library was silent now, the last echoes of footsteps gone, leaving us in a space that felt like it belonged only to us. "We should probably leave," Emma said with a soft laugh, though neither of us moved. "Yeah," I replied, smiling. "But I don't think I want this night to end." She tilted her head, her expression playful but tender. "Then maybe it doesn't have to." We gathered our things slowly, almost reluctantly, as though dragging out the moments before the outside world could reclaim us. When we stepped into the night, the air was cool and fresh, carrying the scent of rain-soaked earth. The street was quiet, the city hushed in the aftermath of the storm. I walked beside her, our shoulders brushing, our hands brushing until finally, without hesitation, she laced her fingers through mine. And just like inside the library, the world seemed to pause again. People might pass by, cars might roll along the wet pavement, but none of it mattered. What mattered was the warmth of her hand in mine, the way my heart felt lighter, freer, more alive. As we walked together into the night, I realized something profound. The door I had closed on myself so many times before had finally opened. Not just because of her kiss, not just because of her touch, but because, for the first time, I had allowed it. Emma glanced at me, her smile soft, her eyes full of something that felt like promise. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't the end of a chance meeting. It was the beginning of a story neither of us had expected, but both of us desperately needed. The storm had passed. The door had closed. And our hearts, finally, opened.